come out today looking for something called the Conscientious Objectors stone, and apparently it's an outcropping of rock that was used as a lookout for conscientious objectors who were hiding out at a nearby farm. It's a piece of history that's been forgotten about, really, so I'm interested in finding out where it is and finding out some history about it as well. We've just come to this beck and there aren't any obvious stepping stones, so it looks like we're going to be getting our feet wet. Don't think the dogs will mind, will you guys? Just going to show you something now growing in the beck. I don't know if anybody recognises it, but this is water mint. Let's crush the leaf. Have a smell so you can smell that. Lovely smell. Minty smell. Fresh mint. It's like toothpaste. Break a piece off. Show you. Beautiful plant. It's got such a lovely smell as well. Just growing wild here in the beck. Now this is the area they were hiding out in. In the background over there you can see the old man of Coniston with its head very much in the clouds. But just over this little hill here should be the farm that was the safe house. You can see from the height of the bracken this is going to be like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but we will persevere and we will find it for you. We're looking down now onto the farm that was the safe house. Greenmoor Farm is what it's called. And you're looking round at a landscape that really hasn't changed since the men were hiding out here in 1916. I'm going up to have a look at this outcrop here. I don't know if it is this one or not, but it does look like if you're going to sit somewhere and keep watch, this might be the place to do it. You're going to have to be careful today as well because there's lots of ticks in this bracken. Let's have a look. Don't appear to be any names. Can't see anything. Have a look round the front. Now, I don't think it's this one. Oh well, I'm going to have a look. It's another place. Let's have a look. What's around here? No, can't see anything there. I really do have to wonder how on earth did this farm become a safe house? Because even today it's the middle of nowhere. So what it must have been like in 1916. We've come down to have a look at this beautiful beck. You can see Bramble's enjoying it. And it's a real storybook beck. Now beck is an interesting word because it was brought over by the Norwegian Vikings over 1,000 years ago when they settled into this area. So it's interesting that these little words have kept in our language for so long. I'm going to make my way through this bracken up to that crag there because I think that's where the names are. So I'm going to do a little bit of bushwhacking. Try and get up to the top, fight my way through all this bracken. It's getting a bit steeper. Onwards and upwards. This for me is what history is all about. Finding the forgotten stories. You know, this is like a message through time. Fantastic. MC. A. I don't know what it says. Boozy. B-O-O-S. EYRHJSW, and that's KS. Who were these men? You know, what dreams did they have? What aspirations did they have? What hopes did they have? All gone now, but they're still here. Fantastic. And when I look and I sit and think that these people whose names are on this stone sat in the exact same spot and look down a valley that's virtually unchanged. One of those sort of strange moments, like a connection with the past. Yeah. The story of the conscientious objectors is largely a forgotten one, especially during the First World War. When war broke out, a million men signed up, but a lot of people, it was against the beliefs to kill, to take another life. And there were people for political reasons didn't want to fight. But most people looked on as being cowards because they wouldn't sign up like the brothers had, or the work people, the work friends had. But a lot of conscientious objectors objected to taking life. They didn't object to doing the bit, and a lot joined the non-combatant corps, which did work behind the lines in France, behind the trenches, and a lot joined the Royal Army Medical Corps, and they actually worked in the trenches with the fighting soldiers, and a lot were killed going out into no man's land, bringing wounded soldiers back. So they certainly weren't cowards. Now, the men who were here, well, today they'd be called political agitators, I suppose. They belong to a movement called the Socialist Labour Party. And Greenmoor Farm, which is just behind me here, was part of a series of safe houses that stretched from this side of the country all the way through to Halifax in Yorkshire. And what amazes me is, even now, in the 21st century, there's nobody here. How did they get messages to each other? How did people know where to come? And how on earth were they set up in the first place? Now, this area has a large, or it did have a large, Baptist and Quaker movement. And a lot of the conscientious objectors were Baptists and Quakers. So I wonder if that has some bearing on the safe houses. There is another one just on the other side of the valley, another safe house. So I don't know, I have to do some more digging about that. Here's some more here. WRS. As I make my way back down, nearly falling, I do wonder what was going through their heads when they were sat up there, painstakingly chiseling their initials on the rock. I wonder if they ever thought that the names would still be here, well over 100 years later. They did get a bit of a raw deal, the conscientious objectors in the First World War, because they had to go to a military tribunal to sort of put the case forward. Most of the appeals were turned down, and if your appeal was turned down, what happened was, as soon as you left the appeal board, you were classed as being absent without leave, and you were arrested straight away and sent to prison, military prison, where you had to do hard labour, and it was solitary confinement. But it didn't just end there. When they left prison, they were classed as being absent without leave again, and they were rearrested and sent back to prison, and that went on and on until finally they were released in 1919. I'm back down at the beck with the dog squad. As I've been making my way down, I've been thinking about what the men must have felt like. They must have been terrified. The country was against them, they were hiding out, they'd no hope of going home, And what happened to them? This is something I will find out about now. At the end of this video I'll tell you what I find out, because it's fascinating. It's a link to the past. And you pick a bottle up and it's an anonymous piece, you don't know who had it, where it came from. But those names, they were people who lived, just like we do now. And like I said, they had hopes, they had dreams, they had aspirations. Who knows what became of them? You've got your welly boot in there. It's alright, no matter. Rumble! Rumble Bobs! I'm going across the beck now, and I'm going to have a look at the farm. See what it's like. I'm not going to go into the farm because there's people living there, and I don't want to be nosy and invade the privacy. But looking at these buildings, I bet there's not a lot changed from 1916. So you're looking at now what the men who sat on the Conscientious objectors stone would have looked at when they came down for the tea or the dinner. Fantastic. I've just found this in the bracken. I don't know what it is. Big piece of iron connected to something, or connecting something to something. Don't know. Interesting though. That's what's called a harebell. Beautiful purple flower. Same colour as a bluebell. I think this plant here is wild marjoram. Definitely smells nice. I think that's what it might be. It's surprising what you find when you're mooching with the dog squad. I don't know if you can see this, it's a patch of wild raspberries. Fantastic. And they taste nice as well. See, little delicate raspberries. And as you can tell, Ramble loves raspberries. I don't know if you can hear that bird. It's a yellowhammer, and it sounds like it's saying, "Little bit of bread and no cheese." I've been doing some research on the initials and the names that we saw on the Conscientious objectors stone, and it's very interesting because in the square that we're looking at, there's 6 sets of initials and 1 name, and it's thought that these people, these men, were using Greenmoor Farm as a safe house. Now the 3 sets of initials at the top of the stone are thought to belong to 3 brothers, William, Tom and Harry Stoker. They're 3 brothers who were businessmen in Halifax in Yorkshire, but they were also sons of a man called Dick Stoker, who was a socialist councillor from Wigan. And in 1916 Dick Stoker Jr. was secretary of the Halifax branch of the No Conscription Fellowship, one of the organisations that was set up to oppose conscription in the First World War. Because of his business commitments, he was exempted from conscription until the 1st of November 1916. After that, he went on the run, and he managed to stay away from the authorities till the end of the war. And in 1918, he actually visited Bolshevik Russia. Now, his two brothers weren't as lucky. Tom and Harry were both captured and court-martialed and sent to military prison. But once they were released, they disappeared and went on the run. And by the end of the war, they were still at liberty. The authorities were still looking for them. Alfred Boozy, where it says A. Boozy, was a member of the British Socialist Party, and he was arrested in Halifax, and he was sent to Pontefract Barracks, where apparently he was very, very ill-treated, and then he disappeared, and he was officially recorded as being absent without leave for over a year. Now, the other initials, MC, are thought to belong to a man called Mark Collins, another Halifax socialist. The men with the initials RH and GH are in the main inscription, but it's not sure who they are. At the top it says WRS and then WR Stoker, and that appears to be the same person. The story of conscientious objection is an interesting one. In the First World War, the men who objected were treated terribly. They were looked at as cowards, lacking moral fibre, and most of them, their appeals were just turned down, and they were sent to frontline units, as it were. Because what happened was, once their appeal was turned down, they were technically classed as being enlisted, and sometimes they were sent to units in the front lines where you could be shot for disobeying an order. So it wasn't a good time to be a conscientious objector. Now, the Second World War was similar. It must be noted in the First World War that Britain was the only country fighting that actually gave men the option for conscientious objection. None of the other countries did, which I think is an interesting point. Now, back to the Second World War, there was a lot of conscientious objectors, and a lot were on religious grounds. It wasn't they didn't want to do the bit, they just refused to kill. And a lot of these conscientious objectors volunteered to join bomb disposal units. Now imagine that, actually volunteering to join the most dangerous job in the military at the time. Bomb disposal units. It's a terribly high casualty rate, but they did it because they wanted to do the bit. And also a lot of conscientious objectors volunteered to join the newly formed parachute regiment, the parachute battalion in the Royal Army Medical Corps, the air landing field ambulances and the parachute field ambulances. One in particular was 224 parachute field ambulance, which had a lot of conscientious objectors, and they were acknowledged by the fighting men in the parachute battalions as being some of the bravest of the brave. They were going out into no man's land, the middle of battles, and bringing men back, German and British. Now, there's an interesting story. I don't know if it's true or not. Apparently it was published in a newspaper in London in 1944 in July. And what happened is, so the story goes, on D-Day, when the Allies were being parachuted in, there was a German officer in charge of a small detachment of German soldiers, and they were shooting at some paratroopers, and one of them was hidden behind a tree, and the German officer was trying to shoot him. Well, all of a sudden a voice came out in German saying, "Excuse me, do you have any blankets?" And the German officer was stunned, and he shouted back, "What are you talking about? What's going on? What's all this nonsense?" And the voice behind the tree shouted back, "I'm a conscientious objector with the medical corps, and we've lost all our blankets, and I was wondering if you had any." And when the German was being interrogated, when he'd been captured in Caen, he actually told the British officer who was talking to him that incident convinced him that all the British were mad. Mad, but very brave.